So just because you criticize something doesn't necessarily mean you don't think the people involved have supplied value or skill. So you can watch a film that the visual effects are great, the set design is great, even the acting is really, really good, but if actors have to stay on script and they're only allowed to say and do what they're told they have to say and do, which is how most jobs work, sometimes what they're given to work with is just not very good. Sometimes the combination of all the things together, even the exquisite cinematography, the exquisite set design, the really good special effects, all of this stuff can combine and still just create shit. That's just the nature of art, of the nature of all art. You can get the most expert person at a particular skill set that can do something really, really, really well. Art doesn't have the same nuts and bolts as like mechanicking or building a building does. So if you're building a building to keep the weather off, and that's all the purpose of that building is, it's not meant to be a modern architecture masterpiece that just looks shit and is soulless, as they all seem to be. If the purpose is to keep the weather off, there's a formula that you can follow that will perfectly encapsulate that specific task. The same as mechanicking. If your suspension's broken, you can replace the suspension bit. If a wheel's broken, if a tire's worn out, if an engine's rooted, any of these things are specific mechanical, very, very specific things that can be repaired or can be replaced. Art doesn't really fall within the same sort of thing. All the individual nuts and bolts of all the disparate things. So the nuts and bolts of the graphics, or the CG, the visual effects, the nuts and bolts of the acting, the nuts and bolts of the cinematography, the nuts and bolts of the set design. All of these things might be exquisite, but at the end of the day, you'll end up with an Audi, not a Toyota. And the reason I say Audi, not a Toyota, is Audi's at the bleeding edge of technology. They always sort of have been. They'll come up with stuff. They'll make more powerful cars that handle really, really, really good. They'll stick 8 ball joints in the front of the car when the Camry's got 2. And the 8 ball joints does a job, but it also drastically increases the amount of maintenance that's required on that vehicle. You'd think 8 of a part would last 8 times as long as 1 of a part, but that's just not the way the mechanics of things like suspension works. And we can go into the ins and outs at some point as to why the 8 ball joints is better. Now, some of the more expensive Toyotas, like the Lexuses, some of them have actually swapped to a system that has 6 ball joints instead of 8. Some of them have 4 instead of 2. So that there are reasons for things to going on. But an Audi's at the bleeding edge. An Audi is more like the blockbuster film of the automotive industry. So up until the last 10 years, you would consider like the nightly news, the Toyota Camry of media. So it just plows along. It does its job. It doesn't inject anything. It's not exciting. All it does a very specific job of getting you from point A to point B, and the point A and the point B is nothing more than this happened, it happened here, and that's it. But slowly, they've been trying to become Audis. They've been trying to go, well, we think this because of this, and we've been told this because of this, and it goes from being facts, and it goes from being news, from disseminating actual factual information, to being art, to having a bent, a spin, or something else. And I think that might be a lot of the problem with modern films. So all the individual components in an Audi are just great, but the combination of them, high maintenance, not excellent reliability, and really, really, really shit resale value. But you can go and spend 50% of what a new Camry costs for a 10-year-old Camry that's been used as a taxi that has 700,000 Ks on it. But the thing is, it has 700,000 Ks on it. It was able to get those kilometers. It was able to do that job for that period of time, even as a taxi, even with those dickheads running into and over everything, even with them not really being maintained in the most mechanically sympathetic method, because, well, that's another story. automotive industry is more about logistics. It's more about what actuaries dictate rather than what's best mechanically for things. 15,000 kilometer servicing is garbage. Oils aren't that good. It's not that the motors are bad, it's that the oils aren't that good. Modern motors are sloppier than older motors. They're actually less forgiving, but they've got much, much higher service intervals. Anyway, that's not the point of all of this. And there's people, anyone ever watch this, there'd be huge debates about oil and it's great. And then synthetic that isn't synthetic oil, which isn't synthetic, and a lot of animals were murdered for the palm oil, for the base, for the synthetic oil. Synthetic. Everything is a bill of goods that we're sold, and sometimes that bill of goods is not looked at closely enough. So you buy an Audi knowing it's at the cutting edge, it's at the bleeding edge of the tech. You know it's going to be, for a short period of time, probably the most advanced vehicle on the road at the time. You buy a Toyota because you know your kids are going to bump into shit all the time and that no one's ever going to open the bonnet. They do different jobs. They do different things. But the film industry, I think, is meant to be a Toyota. They're meant to do a very specific thing in a very specific way, but they're becoming an Audi. So putting a small political message in something is not the same as making the whole film the political message or the whole story the political message. Trying to update things for a modern audience when humans are essentially humans and have been for, well, let's just, from when we started digging the ground and growing our own shit, about 12,000 years, they say. So humans have been humans. Most people are worried about food on the table, roof over their head. If you then go and start bashing them over the head with things that are contrary to them being able to put a roof over their head and put food in their mouths, or put a roof in their mouths and food over their head, depending on their individual proclivities, it sort of rubs people the wrong way. So I want to go to a film and I want to be entertained. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be happy. It doesn't even necessarily mean it has to be fun. There are some movies out there that are heart-wrenching, that are horrible, but they're usually so far removed from our actual lives, from what we're doing, the mundane shit we do on a daily basis, that it might just be a cathartic change in our mindset. It might not be any change at all. But what I find with a lot of modern stuff, I don't remember it when I leave. There's no change. There's no thought. There's no anything. I don't give a crap about the characters. They can all die. But the problem is, like my review of that I didn't actually mention in the review. There's like 7 characters in Strange New Worlds that are in the original series. And they're main characters. You know they can't die, but then they might die because in the modern day and age, people fucking snuff it all the time, and then they're just miraculously resurrected through multiverses or magic or whatever, or the writers just seem to forget whatever the hell it is they wrote the week before. So there's no tension, there's no stress, there's no on the edge of my seat, you know, there's no, I really like these characters, I want to see what's happening to them, I want to see how they become what they become. But we don't get to see that because they either are what they were in 10 years' time, or they're better than they were in 10 years' time. So, I don't know, maybe the whole Star Trek universe suffers severe fucking head trauma. I think I already said that. Anyway, things trying to be what they're not doesn't usually make them better. That's my main point. That's the main point with everything. So people sticking a big turbo and a bunch of boost on a shitty little Camry and then get all upset when it blows up. Or people putting a heavy-duty clutch in a WRX because they like doing 7,000 RPM launches and then it launches the gearbox. It's exactly the same thing. Basically, people injecting, instead of having a character arc, instead of having the hero's journey, it's like, well, these people are perfect to begin with, so they can't really go anywhere. So, and then, yeah, so it can't go anywhere. So where's the suspense? Where's the tension? Where's the incentive to actually want to continue watching it? The only reason I have any interest in watching the next season of Strange New Worlds when it comes out is because they left it on a cliffhanger. And I know that's a cheap trick, and I know they've been doing it for years, but that's basically it. And at this point, I still think it's mostly, I just want to watch it mostly. It's the spent time fallacy. It's the fact that I've invested so much of my individual time into this, it's like 26 hours. Is it 26 hours? Let's not say, let's say 20. Say 15 hours of my time that I could have been spent doing something actually productive. So maybe they're going to come up with something useful, something productive, something that I actually want to see. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about that. If you can't be good at it, or whatever. I mean, do whatever the hell you want. I'm not your mother.